We can see your screen, Nilesh.
You can see, sir. Okay, sir. So thank you, sir, for the kind word of introduction. And I would especially like to thank Rumta sir for giving me this topic and also for making sure that it sticks to the science behind the IOL and not the commerce. His inputs have shaped today's presentation. So these are my financial disclosure, but none of it will be affecting today's talk. So why are we listening to this presentation? As pointed out in the welcome address, premium IOLs are considered as costly IOLs and are counseled to the patient similarly. Many a times it is seen that when patient asks, कौन सा लेंस लगवाएं? Then the counselor say, आपको आरा से पटना जाना है? तो आप अब सस्ते कार में जाइएगा या स्पोर्ट्स कार में आप देख लीजिए. तो मरीज जो अमीर होते हैं वो स्पोर्ट्स कार ले आते हैं, पर जब सड़क पे लेके निकलते हैं तो फिर ये होता है. So before prescribing any IOL, we need to understand that what will suit the eye, that is the best for that eye. And in this presentation, we would like to try to understand the science behind each lens and how to go about prescribing them. So first, let us understand what is the standard IOL mean. It is meant to replace the natural crystalline lens and restore the distant vision. In the strictest sense, it restores the spherical equivalent, that 2-0, and it should be biocompatible. That's it. That is the meaning of standard intraocular lens. So what are these lenses made up of? All of the IOL are either made up of silicon or acrylic polymers, except for implantable Collamer lens, which is a phakic IOL made up of shark cartilage. PMMA is the basic polymer of rigid IOLs. All other foldable IOLs are proprietary polymers, which the companies do not reveal, but they can be broadly classified into hydrophilic and hydrophobic materials. So silicon is purely hydrophobic material, and acrylic foldable IOLs are either hydrophobic or hydrophilic. So what is meant to be hydrophilic or hydrophobic? When we drop a drop of water on the surface, it spreads to some extent. Now the angle made by the outer edge of that spread with the surface is less than 90. Then it means the surface is hydrophilic. And when it is more than hydrophobic, when it is more than 90, it is hydrophobic. So in hydrophobic, the water droplet will remain as a droplet. In hydrophilic, it will spread over the surface. That's the meaning of hydrophilic and hydrophobic, and not the water that it attracts inside. So silicon IOLs are made up of hydrophobic polymers, which were first of the foldable IOLs. Due to its low refractive index, they were very bulky lens and thus were very difficult to load and to implant. And they were also very quick to open. They had very poor lens memory. So they were also prone for pitting, and silicon oil used to get adhered to them on the posterior surface. The modern silicon IOL, though, have a better polymer, which is having better biocompatibility, but still they are not as popular as the acrylic IOLs. Hydrophobic acrylic IOLs are claimed to have least PCO rate by the companies, but that claim is only partially true. We will understand more about that later. Hydrophobic IOLs are though easier to handle and have very good lens memory, and thus they also are a good choice to have. So coming to some practical aspects that are being directly affected by types of biomaterial. A few days back, there was a discussion on BOS group that a young pseudo-phakic female who was having some issue in the marriage due to the shimmering reflex in the eye. Now, whatever be the social or moral issue associated with that case, the silicone IOL in such patient helped to reduce the shimmering, which is directly related to the refractive index. Also, ghosting of image is more in the patients who are having the high index materials such as hydrophobic acrylic IOLs. Factors that may influence the formation of glistening, which is fluid-filled vacuole in the lens optics, include IOL material composition, manufacturing technique, and packaging. Hydrophobic material, the hydrophobic material will have more vacuole formation because the water stays as a droplet. The associated ocular conditions such as glaucoma or conditions that have breakdown of blood aqueous barrier can also cause glistening. While the impact of glistening on the visual function is not assessed, they are rarely explanted because of glistening. Post-operative optic opacification of modern hydrophilic acrylic IOL has been a significant complication, and a recent survey by ASRS showed that the most common cause of explantation of hydrophilic IOL, 98% of the hydrophilic acrylic IOL that were explanted were because of IOL opacification. Now, this opacification varies from polymer to polymer and thus depends on brand to brand. Not all brand will have the same amount of IOL opacification. Calcified deposit leading to significant opacification requiring explantation also have been observed on the surface of silicone oil in the eyes with asteroid hyalosis. Whitish deposit appear only on the posterior optic surface in the late post-operative period. Now coming to the lens, how they are being manufactured, there are two manufacturing technology. In lathe machine, a block of biomaterial is shaped into IOL. Once the IOL are shaped as desired, they are put into a glass bottle filled with glass spheres and rotated for polishing. Now this is tumble polishing and it is uncontrolled and thus sometimes may introduce uneven surfaces and scratches on the IOL. Compared to that, in molding process, the biomaterial is heated up to make a malleable blob, which is then kept into a mold and pressed with a weight to give it a desired shape. Now this process is not requiring any tumble polishing because it is in a mold. So it won't have any complication of scratches or uneven surface and thus will have less of glare and less of halos. Now, what are premium IOL, the topic of today? The premium IOL give an advantage over the standard IOL in terms of biomaterial, in terms of IOL design, or they have some special refractive property, either asphericity or toricity or multifocality or a combination of all of these. Now, what are the premium biomaterials? They have long-term uveal biocompatibility, better capsular biocompatibility, and they have tackiness. Long-term uveal biocompatibility means the conversion of monocyte into small round cell and macrophage into epithelioid cell in response to any foreign material is not happening. Now, as we can see, the silicone IOL is having the best uveal biocompatibility, followed by hydrophilic and then hydrophobic acrylic IOL. We can see in this area, these are the epithelioid cells that they have converted into, the macrophages that have converted into epithelioid cells. This is a hydrophobic acrylic IOL. Now, the new technology that is coming in is hydrophobic IOL having hydrophilic surface. Now that coating, when you see, the macrophages remain as a small round cell and don't convert into epithelioid cell, and thus they won't cause any long-term uveal inflammation. Capsular biocompatibility is reduction in the reaction of lens epithelial cell to form posterior capsular opacification, but should not inhibit the anterior and posterior capsule adhesion in the periphery. The picture here shows a three-piece hydrophobic acrylic lens with excellent capsular biocompatibility. We can see the posterior capsule is completely clear. The anterior capsule is somewhat opacified, and the posterior anterior capsule in the periphery is completely adhered and opacified, giving it stability. The development of PCO is more dependent on the optical design of the lens rather than the material. But the anterior capsule opacification, though, is more in hydrophilic acrylic than hydrophobic acrylic and least with the silicone IOL. Now coming to tackiness, it literally means slightly adhesive or gummy feeling. So silicone is having the least tackiness, then hydrophilic acrylic, and hydrophobic acrylic is the most tacky. So that tackiness helps in sticking of the lens into the posterior capsule or anterior capsule. So certain lenses use tackiness enhancing technology on the posterior surface of the lens to enable that lens to sit on the posterior capsular bag firmly, and it also reduces the chance of PCO, and it improves the toric implantation, the toric stability. Now, if we have more tackiness on the anterior surface, the lens will unfold in a very long time. So tackiness inhibiting technology is also used on the anterior surface of the lens. That inhibiting technology will help to reduce the unfolding time in the bag to less than 5 seconds. Now coming to IOL design, yellow tinted optics is the talk of the town. All FDA approved IOLs are actually UV blocking lens, be it clear or yellow tinted optics. The yellow tinted lens, which contain chromophore or UV4 pigments, which are meant to absorb the short wavelength visible blue light, which might be affecting the macula adversely. It is postulated because of the natural deposition of pigments that happen in the lens, natural crystalline lens. Optimum absorption of blue light only in the short wavelength below 430 nanometer though is necessary If the blue light completely is cut off, as you can see, the circadian rhythm goes off, and the patient will have altered circadian rhythm and also decreased scotopic vision. So optimal absorption has to happen. Now, what will the patient feel? This is the normal photograph of a landscape. When seen through a clear optic lens, this will seen as blue. As you can see, this is the normal, and this is the clear optic lens. And when the patient sees through yellow lens, you can see it is warmer color. The colors are little warm. This is the only visible effect that will be noted by the patient and not the other effects. Now, coming to angulation of the IOL. Planar haptic, when inserted, may result in capsular wrinkling, which can act as nidus for the cell and opacification. The angulation of haptic will stretch that posterior capsule so that the nidus won't form. Now, high degree of angulation requires the IOL to be tilted too much, so implantation is little difficult. Newer model are coming with offset haptic, where the haptic is in one plane and optic is in another plane, and they form an angle of 5 degrees on the posterior capsule. So it gives the benefit of implantation of a planar IOL and the benefit of stretching of the posterior capsule as the angulated IOL. Now, most important of all modification is the square edge optic, and it is the most important factor in reduction of PCO in today's world. It works via creating a mechanical barrier, contact inhibition, and high tension on the posterior capsule. The pictograph depicts the proliferative lens epithelial cells that have come and they are stuck at the square edge and not going beyond, and thus PCO won't happen in this case. The differential rate in PCO in different biomaterial may be due to the change in actual edge profile. Now, all company will claim that their lens is true square edge, but once they are put in physiological condition in scanning electron microscope, we can see the profile that is the true square edge, and what the profile actually seen is the difference is depicted in the red area. Now that red area is most in hydrophilic acrylic IOL. It becomes almost round in physiological condition. The silicon retains its shape the most, and hydrophobic IOL also gets little rounded but less than hydrophilic acrylic IOL. So this is the reason why hydrophilic IOL have, despite of being square edge, have more PCO rate, and hydrophilic IOL is having lesser PCO rate. Now coming to the optical properties of the premium biomaterial. These IOLs are invariably high power lens, and thus peripheral rays are deviated to converge different than compared to the central rays due to the prismatic effect, a phenomena called as spherical aberration. Now, positive spherical aberration is when the peripheral rays converge nearer than the central rays. With special optics, the sphericity is achieved when all rays converge at a single point. Further improvement in optics have led to formation of negative aspheric lens, which makes the peripheral rays fall further back than the central rays. Now, why that is important? Normal cornea is positively aspheric at the time of birth, and lens has negative asphericity, so making the eye a completely aspheric system. As the age progresses, the lens becomes progressively positive in the sphericity. So that spherical aberration, the eye becomes positively spheric. Now, when the lens is changed with as IOL, the lens needs to counteract the positive spherical aberration of cornea, and thus we need a lens that is having having negative asphericity, but at least having an aspheric profile, not going for a positive spherical aberration. So aspheric optics, how they are made? They are made by either decreasing the peripheral power so that the lens, in the periphery is not converging that much, or by increasing central power so that central rays are converging front. So thus they are having variable curvature, which makes them difficult to manufacture, and that's why they are costly. Now, aspheric monofocal square edge IOLs are now the most common foldable IOL implanted around the world, and they are going to be soon become so commonplace that they would go to become standard IOLs. That is because they are giving better contrast sensitivity, better mesopic vision, that is nighttime vision, better nighttime driving, and it is better for young patients. But they are more expensive, and they need actually a corneal topography or aberrometry to decide which of the aspheric profile we need to prescribe to the patient. It requires perfect centration, because if the lens is decentered, then the spherical aberration can increase. They can decrease depth perception, and when the pupil is small, the asphericity goes off. And because of the introduction of the keratorefractive surgeries, the aberrations are induced in the cornea. So the corneal positive aberration can become negative, can become aspheric. So they are not to be prescribed to any patient who have undergone previous LASIK or any other keratorefractive procedure. Now, toric IOLs are for astigmatism correction. Recommended preoperative corneal astigmatism of more than one diopter needs to be prescribed a toric IOL, and the positioning of IOL is most important step because each degree of deviation reduces 3.3% of the power, and more than 10 degree of rotation warrants redialing of the lens. So in this condition, tachiness helps in the stability, and also the capsular biocompatibility that helps in stability. Now, coming to the recent talk of town, multifocal IOLs. Multifocal IOLs are intraocular lens providing two distinct foci, thus acting as a bifocal lens, eliminating the need of near vision glass. They are based on two optical phenomena, the refractive IOL that are having different zones of refractive powers. So the one zone will make the rays converge for near focal point, one for intermediate, or one for distant focal point. In multifocal, it will having only near and distant focal point. In trifocal, they will have 3 points. Now, pupil needs to be of the proper size for the light to fall in proper zone while viewing far and near object in the refractive IOLs, making it highly pupil dependent. The other pattern is diffractive phenomena, which is deviation of light when they hit a sharp edge. The sharp edge is of the step-like pattern of the diffractive IOL. Now, light waves, when deviated, interact with each other, forming interference pattern. So white color, what we are seeing here is the positive interference. That means both light are interacting and giving white light. But the negative, the black light is negative interference. That means the light waves are canceling each other out. Now, as the diffractive IOL are having multiple steps, they form a complex interplay of these interference, and they lead to orders of diffraction. Now, zero order of diffraction is when the light is passing directly. As we can see, it is passing directly. So it is giving vision for far. And first order diffraction helps to finalize the near vision, because that is the first order of diffraction. Above first order diffraction is second order, third order, or fourth order. They will result in positive dysphotopsia, and negative interference, that was the black rings that we saw, will reduce the contrast sensitivity. Now, what are positive dysphotopsia? Are glare, halos, and starburst. These happen due to diffraction and thus are rarely seen with refractive multifocals. And all of the recent advances in diffraction pattern are aimed to reduce these phenomena, because they are actually preventing many of the patients to be prescribed multifocal. Now, while talking about positive dysphotopsia, we also need to understand the negative dysphotopsia, which is complained by the patient as temporal arc of black shadow. These are probably produced by the deviation of peripheral rays, something like jack-in-the-box phenomena that we used to see in the aphakic glass. With development of peripheral capsular adhesion and opacification, they block the peripheral rays from entering the eye, and thus the phenomena is reduced. The phenomena goes off after 6 or 8 months of the post-operative period. YAG capsulotomy thus should not be performed beyond 5 mm zone to prevent secondary negative dysphotopsia. Now, coming to physics of adhesion, how the diffraction gives power. The steps of diffraction ring will decide the amount of adhesion the IOL provides. Shorter steps provide higher adhesion, and wider steps provide smaller adhesion. Diffractive lenses are less dependent on pupil size. The higher step size, the height of the step, decides how much energy is going to be given, either far or near, how much energy is going to be distributed. With a constant step height throughout the lens, the same energy will be distributed even when the patient is seeing far or near. Like when the patient is seeing near, the pupil is small. This is the amount of light that is going inside the eye. When the pupil is large, as we can see here, the same amount of light will go for near vision only. The far will get less vision. Now, what companies have done is make apodization pattern. In this, what happens is the steps go peripheral. As we go in periphery, the step height reduces. Now, that reduction will mean more of the light is going to go for far vision. So when the patient is seeing far, the pupil is dilated, apodized IOL will actually have better distant visual acuity. That gradual decrease of step will also have less of positive dysphotopsia and thus having superior optical performance in myopic condition. Now coming to trifocal IOL, with the advent of computers, a need of intermediate focal length arose. The progressive spectacle that provide relief in phakic eyes, the trifocal IOLs aim for the same benefit in pseudophakic eyes to provide spectacle-free intermediate vision. Now, how they are made? They are made with a diffractive pattern for like 33 centimeter, that is the near point, and around 50 to 60 centimeter, that is the intermediate vision. So the steps that are made are alternating. One step is for near, then another step is for intermediate, then another is of near, then the next is of intermediate vision. So what is happening is the pupil dependency goes off because each MM is having 2 or 3 steps of near and far, near and intermediate both. The multifocal and trifocal lens though have fixed focal lengths. That means any object that is falling not on that focal point will appear blur. The extended depth of focus makes continuous focus of variable distance. Like it gives a focal length that is continuous from the near point, that is 33 centimeter, to an intermediate 60 centimeter to distant focal point. So that is achieved by a different pattern of grating, the diffraction grating pattern that is known as éclat pattern, which is French for ladder. That is optimized to achieve maximum grating efficiency in a given diffraction order. These lenses thus have least amount of positive dysphotopsia and are tolerant up to 1 diopter of astigmatism. Due to its tolerance to aberration, it may be the best option to give for patients who are having post-refractive surgery for getting a good quality spectacle-free vision. So now each company will tell that their lens is having different addition. It becomes very confusing which lens should be prescribed. The defocus curve will help us understand that and to make us that decision. Just as in presbyopic correction, the IOL should be given for preferred working distance. The range of working of the patient should be converted to dioptric power, like 100 centimeter will be 1 diopter, 50 centimeter will be 2 diopter, 33 centimeter will be 3 diopters. So we will convert the preferred working distance into diopters, and then we will see the lens, the defocus curve of the lens, and we will see the peaks, where the peaks are happening. And we will see which lens is having corresponding peak to what we need. So maximum peak of the curve need to match the calculated dioptric power to give optimal result. For example, working distance of 50 centimeter, in this case, what we are seeing on our screen, at 50 centimeter will be 2 diopters. So in this, the green arrow, that is the extended depth of focus, will give best result. But if the patient wants a distance, a working distance of 33 centimeter, then extended depth of focus won't work. Despite it being a premium, more costly IOL, it won't give the vision that they require. And we will have to prescribe a bifocal or trifocal IOL that is having maximum peak at 33 centimeter. So each lens comes with the defocus curve. Each company gives a defocus curve in the box itself. Along with the IOL. So we need to understand the defocus curve of each IOL and understand the need of the patient and match those two, and then prescribe either bifocal, trifocal, or extended depth of focus. The most important of all is to spot a poor candidate pre-operatively and not to counsel them from premium, especially multifocal IOLs. The patient with too many queries or unreasonable expectation will always be disappointed and should not be counseled for these lenses. Patient with very sharp, who require very sharp near vision and who require more work in night also are poor candidates for multifocal IOL, as they will always receive a part of light energy for the near work and not the full light. Higher astigmatism should be tackled with multifocal IOL coupled with toric IOL. Retinal pathologies and diabetes should not be prescribed multifocal IOL, as they may require VR surgeries in later, and it becomes difficult with the diffraction or refraction pattern. So how to decide? Each eye demands the IOL that fits in. It's not about what patient wants, but more about what patient needs, and most about what suits the patient. So a proper pre-operative assessment, a proper IOL calculation to the perfection, and to rule out poor candidates, and counseling the patient in pre-operative time only, that if all goes right throughout the surgery, then only I will implant. Otherwise, we might need to go for a monofocal IOL. That is that proper intraoperative step, and the counseling has to be done, and continuous post-operative follow-up for better neural and psychological adaptation should be done. So coming back to our first example, our job is to tell the person what kind of car will suit him. Either it is a hatchback, a sedan, or SUV. Let them choose the brand they want to. They let them decide they want a Nano, a Swift, or a Mercedes. But we have to tell them they need a hatchback. That is the take-home message. Thank you for the patient listening and for this opportunity.